Hi friends, Prepared Suburbanite, back at you with a quick update on our garden project and the results of the beer bread recipe. So stick around. The weather here in North Carolina has changed. It is now officially autumn. And because it's autumn, it's cool, it's cold, it's rainy, cloudy, and rather icky. But at least there's no humidity. I guess that's the good thing about this kind of November weather. Last week we had temperatures down into the low 20s. And that's cold for North Carolina, especially this time of year. Thankfully, I was able to get most of the work done on the refurbished raised bed garden framing here, which you can see behind me. That's all framed in. I've still got another coat of the sealant and stain to put on the wood frame, and it was a lot of work, but I think it's going to be well worth it. I think we're a lot more positioned now for a lot more comfortable and rewarding gardening experience come springtime. Altogether, even though I was able to use some materials from the old deck and from the old beds, I've got about $110 worth of investment in the refurbished raised bed gardens. Most of it is in the 2x6 pressure treated timbers that are there. I did have to pick up a couple of 4x4s to use for the corner posts, and a little bit of stain, maybe a couple of quarts of stain in the sealant stain. And I did get a previous comment that was basically saying, oh, don't use treated lumber, it's poison, it'll ruin everything. Well, that may have been true a number of years ago, back in the early days of pressure treated lumber, when they were using things like penta. And but so many improvements have been made in the chemistry today that there is no real risk any longer of poisoning from using 2x6 timbers for raised bed garden framing. I can post a link to an article that I found that supports that particular point of view. And it does require, or it does suggest anyway, that you do seal it and stain it with a quality sealer before you start using it in your garden beds. And I've done that. We used a product called Ready Seal that I was able to pick up at Lowe's Home Improvement. And I think they're also available on order online from Home Depot. So Ready Seal is the name of that product, and it's really good. They call it goof proof, but I really enjoyed it. That's what we did our deck with this spring, and I just put a second coat on the railings and getting ready, or at least hoping that things are going to dry out a little bit so that I can get the floor of the deck done, second coat on the deck. So, but as far as what we needed out here, the Ready Seal is absolutely perfect. It's a sealant and a stain, and it came out absolutely beautiful. We're using a walnut stain on this stuff. This is just first coat on these, but the second coat's really going to bring out the color. So that's where we are with that today. Now, I'm going to go in the house and show you what we did with the beer bread. So we did experiment just a little bit using beer as the liquid for our not as artesian bread. The first batch we used a pretty hoppy IPA, and the texture in the bread, you could really tell that there was a huge difference. It was a lot smoother and a lot softer. Using the milk and water as the liquid to mix the flour in and all that causes the crust to be kind of hard, and the inside just kind of stiff. But it's good bread. It tastes good. But substituting a 12-ounce bottle of beer for the liquid in the recipe that I can post a link to below, or post the whole recipe below, really does change the texture, adds a lot of flavor to the bread, and it makes it just absolutely yummy. Now that was with, our first attempt was with a pretty hoppy IPA that I brewed myself. The second time we said, well, let's just try a regular light beer and see what the difference is. And here's the results of when we used a Yuengling Light, a 12-ounce can of Yuengling Light beer, which is a pretty darn good tasting light beer. The texture is soft, the crust is nice and soft, but it just didn't have the same amount of flavor that that hoppy IPA had. So that's the result. I think probably we're going to be using a lot more beer in the beer bread recipe. So with that said, a couple quick reminders. It's fall. Here in North Carolina, we're starting to get winter seasons coming. Thanksgiving's just a couple of weeks away. So being prepared, you got to take a look at some of the stuff that happens outside. We've got two 55-gallon drums that catch rainwater for us, and I've had to empty those because we had a pretty good layer of ice on top when the cold snap came through a week or so ago. So I dumped those out, cleaned them out a little bit, not the way they should be, but I did rinse them and toss a little bit of bleach in there just to make sure that it doesn't grow any weird stuff over the winter. So I dumped those. That's 110 gallons of water that we had to preserve the buckets for. We'll fill them back up in probably March or April and have them as ready backup for our preps. The other issue that I just want to remind folks about is make sure that you disconnect your external hoses from your faucets outdoors. Disconnect them, turn the water off, try to drain out the hose as best you can, because it can really cause a mess if you allow those hoses to fill up with water and freeze. It's going to cause all kinds of problems, probably inside your house. So make sure you take a few minutes, disconnect the hoses, drain them out as good as you can, and kind of keep it from there. So a couple of fall tips. This is the Prepared Suburbanite reminding you to be prepared always, and I'll see you all on the next video.